coming on. Yeah, I want to go from the start. Walk us through the events of what happened on that day.
On that day, I had voted. As a matter of fact, I saw the Mayor Giuliani at the polling place, and along with which would become the next mayor, Michael Bloomberg. I remember the color of the sky. It was a beautiful dark blue. Every morning after I'd get out of the train on Fulton Street, I'd stop at Starbucks, get my venti mocha, stroll over the plaza until the North Tower. My office was on the 68th floor. I was seated at my desk getting ready for a meeting with my boss and some people from the outside to talk about redevelopment of the agency's website, which was the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So I'm sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden, the tower lunges forward like maybe 10 feet, but then it comes back. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's a little weird. And then all of a sudden, outside of the windows, you could see it was like somebody was cleaning their office from the top of the building, the 107th floor. And all I could think was maybe a small plane veered in the wrong direction. And then finally, someone from our emergency operations department called and said, "We think it's a small plane. We'll keep you advised." So I'm still there. And I had sent people from my staff who were in the 1993 bombing. We had done drills. We put reflective tape in the stairwells. Like I said, we did tons of drills to be ready. We were thinking maybe a plume over a port in New York. But anyway, I sent them to the Marriott, which was on the 16-acre plaza of the World Trade Center. I said, set up some phone lines, take pads, take pencils, take our business continuity plan on a flash drive. And then a little while after, I called my boss who lived in the city, and he wasn't there. Turns out he was at Windows of the World on the 107th floor. I tried to call him, nothing. I texted him, called him. So I called the governor of New York's office. They're the ones who appointed him. His name was Neil Levin, to the position of executive director. And I told him again, something seems amiss, told him what was happening, and they passed along the message. But finally, a security guard comes to my office and said, "Your life is in danger. You have to evacuate now." I said to them, "Well, let me go get my bag first and show off my computer." Again, not knowing what had happened. So I walked the floor to make sure there was no one else on my staff there. We had a woman who was physically challenged. She was no longer on the floor. You may have seen her story. Two strangers picked her up and carried her out of the building. And so I go into the stairwell. I had my BlackBerry. The BlackBerries were very popular then with the little keyboard. And they were the only things in terms of communication that were working that day. And so I'm looking at the BlackBerry. Everything is calm because we had been through this before. And all of a sudden I see this story, an Associated Press story that says, "Terrorists hit Twin Towers." And I'm thinking to myself, And I wasn't going to have a situation where I'm telling everybody there's a panic. And so I saw a friend who was from the aviation department. I said, "I'm going to show you something, but don't respond." So she looks at the story, we look at each other, and we said, "Let's get this line moving." But as I said, it was orderly. Cops were going up there with axes, with oxygen, and you had cops coming down, carrying people or assisting people to go down. I had texted the people who were right ahead of me, the staff who I asked to get there. When I contacted them, even though I sent them like 40 minutes ahead of me, they weren't there yet. We get to about the 6th floor, and we knew that the second tower, the South Tower, had to collapse just from the sheer the sheer force of the building had shifted. And they had these big chiller pipes in the stairwells, and they were to keep the air conditioning cold. But when these pipes burst, it was like a rapids coming down. And as I said, the stairwell was blocked, the lights went out. And that's the moment I thought this was it. I was very calm in that moment. And all of a sudden, I hear somebody a few stairs ahead, come up, come this way, come this way. And the last thing we wanted to do was go up, but we didn't have any choice. And so it turns out he was a Port Authority police officer. His name is David Lim. Since the Port Authority had built the World Trade Center, our staff knew the ins and outs of the buildings. So we were in the stairwell B, and he took us to stairwell C. Meanwhile, a lot of women and men had taken off their shoes because of this water rushing. And so when he was taking us through these offices, there was broken glass, hot wires. I'm just glad I kept my shoes on. And then he took us to the stairwell, and the water there too was rushing. And so they would only let a couple of people at a time open the door to get to another area of the building, basically to get to ground level. And they told us to hold on to the belt buckles of the people in front of us. That's how concerned they were. So it's our turn. We go through the doors, and I thought we were out of the building. I'm thinking it's the sky. It's white. It's like fresh fallen snow, whether it's on the ceiling or the floor or the walls. It was kind of bizarre. Turns out we weren't out. We were in the lobby of the tower, and basically I said, look for footprints. Let's not scream because there's stuff still coming down. After a few minutes, nobody heard us. Said, okay, now it's time to scream. And so miraculously, we saw this light after a few minutes, and it must have been on a bullhorn to say, if you hear this, follow the light. So we walked through this door, and they took us through the side of the World Trade Center towards World Trade Center 4, and we walked under the overhang because of the stuff that was still coming down. It was like burned out Beirut everywhere. So we walk around the plaza. We're going towards Church Street and Broadway. It's interesting, Church Street. And so we get to these stairs, which are now known as the survivor staircase. We're almost to the ground. By the way, those 30 tons of concrete for the staircase are in the memorial. So we get to the ground level. I'm wearing my cute little skirt and pumps and stuff. And all of a sudden, the police officer says, run. I'm like, run? I spent all this time, I'm trying to catch my breath, and you say, run? Then I turned around. Oh my goodness, this black plume was engulfing lower Manhattan. So I ran 16 blocks to the Holland Tunnel. New York City blocks are kind of long, shall we say. It's the quickest 16 blocks I've ever run in my life. And I dove under a car when the plume reached us. And then after, got up, and I texted all my staff to say, we're going to move to New Jersey. Port Authority also built the Holland Tunnel. That's how we got out. And just across the river in New Jersey were our police headquarters, Port Authority Police Department. So I tell them we're going to meet there. So we get there, and I'm saying, where's Fred Marone? Fred Marone was the superintendent of the police department. He wasn't there. There were two other next in line. I said, where are they? Nothing. I'm asking, where is Neil Levin, the executive director of the Port Authority? Nothing. Nobody knew. And so it was determined, because that facility is so close to the Holland Tunnel, they weren't sure if a threat remained. And so we moved within the city of Jersey City to another facility of the Port Authority, the Journal Square Transportation Facility. It was further back to Manhattan, so it gave us some breathing room and away from the Holland Tunnel. And I told the guys there, start dropping phone lines that hunt, because my job was to deal with the news media and the elected officials to let them know what was going on at our facilities. Meanwhile, the chief operating officer comes in. He's just covered in debris, or soot, shall we say. I kind of forgot about that in terms of the chronology. When I was at the Holland Tunnel, no, before I was at the Holland Tunnel, right before we evacuated, I texted all the senior staff saying we're setting up a command center at the Marriott. So he was one of the ones who went to the Marriott and had a ceiling. Sorry, he had the ceilings collapsed on him, and realizing I almost sent these folks to their death is probably something I'm still dealing with. But he says to me, Kayla, I need your help. I'm trying to figure out how am I going to staff this communication center probably for several months and around the clock. He says, the Human Resources Department isn't here yet. We need to figure out who's dead and who's alive. Can you help me? Luckily, work was a distraction, but to think about how we could communicate to the families, the families who hadn't heard from them, or Port Authority staff who either hadn't been to work or escaped work, how are we going to put that out appropriately and sensitively? And so we set up a white page on our internet. We just did that. And then we had a number set up for Port Authority employees needing to know where to report, call this number. And as they called in, they would go in the Excel spreadsheet and we start cheering. There was another phone line for family members who hadn't heard from employees, call this line. So that was in the first 24 hours. That's how we were rolling. The human resources people, we had business continuity plans in our flash drives that we had people chains of how you could connect everybody, but the situation was so fluid, you couldn't just do the phone chain at that point. You kind of had to wait. And so I found out my boss, I didn't know it initially, he and the 33 police officers of the Port Authority and another 32 civilians from the Port Authority, they died. And so we had to figure out what to do next. So we went from rescue to recovery to the funerals. I think I went to 33 funerals. And then we had to restore service between New York and New Jersey, the PATH train, because that was so central to the economy of the region. So we started that. We also had the 9/11 Commission hearings, which were very hard to do because, understandably so, we had family members grieving the loss of their spouses or children. And I remember a lady holding up a picture of her son, pointing to us and say, Port Authority, you killed my son. So that was kind of hard.
And when was it when the addiction and the drinking, the alcohol came into play for you?
I had a DUI in 2013 in Fort Lauderdale. You know, I knew I had a high anxiety, but I just thought, okay, maybe because of the job layoff. So I went through that program, everything is fine, and my mom died. So my dad asked me to come to Georgia. I'm the only single one in the family. So I came, and in January of 2017, DUI number 2. I pretty much thought my life was over then, at least from a career point of view. And so I found out about something here. It's one of the most progressive programs in the United States. It's what they call accountability court, Forsyth County Accountability Court. It's a rigorous program of accountability, but it has a treatment component. That's where I was diagnosed with PTSD and depression, and then with the 2 DUIs, alcohol. And that was really a lifesaver. Sometimes I kick myself saying, how come I didn't recognize the signs earlier? But I didn't know. You know, I wasn't a first responder. I wasn't a member of the military. I wasn't a victim of domestic violence. So it wasn't like the movies for me, you know, where they have a military guy reliving the battlefield. It was very different, but it was excruciating anxiety. But again, I just thought I was depressed. But there I started to get the treatment. In the program I was in, I had a doctor to oversee the medications. I had a therapist, plus we had 2 or 3 groups per week, different type of treatment, dialectical behavior treatment, cognitive behavioral treatment, and we also subject to drug tests from 0 to 7 times per week. We had to go to court twice a week. It was rigorous, but exactly what I needed, and that's really what saved my life.
This year, of course, will be the 20-year anniversary.
Yeah.
So just lastly, just to wrap up, I wanted your opinions on, you know, looking back on it 20 years later, there's, you know, with technology and social media, there's a lot of conspiracies around it. I wonder what your opinion is on the conspiracy that the government were involved or had something to do with 9/11. What do you say when people think that?
They're crazy. You know, there have all been conspiracies that it was the Israelis who did it and all that stuff. The truth is, people in those buildings were represented all nationalities, and so that's not true. I remember when we finally came back to New York at Union Square, I remember some young kids having a petition saying the fix was in, the fix is in. Unless you're impacted about it, if you're into conspiracy theories, period, you're probably going to have similar views on anything happening. But let me just say this. That was a time when the country really came together, really the world. And we all hope that there was opportunity to move forward. The other thing I want to say, one of the reasons why I'm speaking to you is I'm a civilian survivor who got help. But in the buildings on any given day, you had up to 50,000 people, mostly civilians like me, people who just went to work that day, did their job. Some of them died, some of them narrowly escaped, or now drugging or drinking or both, PTSD, depression. The government has screwed them. They don't even know who they are. When I did an interview with the New York Times last year, after that story came out, I started hearing from survivors. They were very grateful because, rightly so, you got to take care of the families, you got to take care of the first responders, but you can't just forget about these people or you just blow them off. That's what's happening. And I remember the funding issue. This has really involved the Victims' Compensation Fund. We as civilians don't get money or anything like that. But the guys who were dying with lung cancer, they had to go beg the Congress for money. These are the same people who said, never forget, never forget. Then when it's time for the money, to have senators and congressmen from different states saying, oh, that's a New York problem. So I'm very disgusted by the situation, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. We gotta have that hope. But on the 20th anniversary, I just hope that can be a day of peace and a little understanding.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for coming on today. I mean, having an insight, of course, of the actual day and being there is amazing. And of course, we're in England, and speaking to a lot of people, you know, we are very educated on 9/11 here, but you know, even some people don't even learn about the third and fourth plane that hit that day. So, you know, a lot of people forget about that, or they just forget about it. But you know, I think it's great to have you come on, tell your side of the story, your experience of the day, and yeah, thank you so much for your time today.